PFD can show many caution and warning messages. You're not expected to learn them, and they're mostly self-explanatory. But you should have a good overview of the types of message and know how to take corrective action. Let's start with flight mode annunciator messages. General AFCS failures are announced in the top middle area. These cannot be reset by pilot action and are removed only when the relevant system is OK. When a message is triggered, it flashes yellow for 5 seconds to get your attention, then goes steady. Each message area has an associated priority, so if 2 messages are triggered at the same time, the one with the highest priority wins, and there is no indication of the existence of lower priority active messages. The second area is for autopilot and yaw damper status messages. For example, the autopilot has disengaged, the yaw damper has disengaged, or both have disengaged. If you disengaged, the message goes steady for a further 5 seconds, then goes away. But if the flight guidance computers initiated the disengagement, the message continues flashing until you acknowledge and manually disengage by pressing the autopilot disengage switch on the control wheel. You may see other lower priority messages. They flash for 5 seconds, then stay on steady until the condition is corrected. The text within the brackets is the action you should take. Similar to the autopilot yaw damper status area, the autopilot yaw damper engagement area shows whether the autopilot is engaged or inhibited, that is, you are prevented from engaging it. Whenever a pilot action is prevented, you get a white message which stays on for 5 seconds. The tactile control steering engagement is also white to alert you to this unusual transitory state, and stays on while a TCS button is pressed. Engagement messages don't flash. Flight director abnormal messages are shown here, for example. Here's the priority list. The message flashes in yellow, then goes steady until you correct it. For example, selecting the other side data with HSI select. If you attempt an invalid correction, the message goes white for 5 seconds and then goes back to yellow. The final message area is for modes. For example, dual flight director mode for a Cat 2 approach is active or has been cancelled by the electronic instrument system or has failed. The modes area also shows the HSI message on the non-flying pilot side. Normally, the left PFD gets nav data from nav source 1 and the right from nav source 2. With the attitude heading source selector in the norm position, PFD1 gets attitude and heading data from AHARS1 and PFD2 from AHARS2. With the ADC source selector in norm, PFD1 gets air data from Air Data Unit 1 and PFD2 from ADU2. If there's an attitude mismatch of more than 3 degrees, you see either a flashing pitch flag with a flashing pitch mismatch annunciation in the mismatch area of the FMA, or a roll flag with a roll mismatch annunciation. You can have both at once, but pitch mismatch has priority. Similarly, if there is a heading difference of more than 9 degrees between the left and right side, then you see a flashing heading flag and the flashing heading mismatch, but pitch mismatch still has priority. Differences in ADU 1 and 2 cause IAS flags. The airspeed threshold is 10 knots. You get the IAS mismatch annunciation. The altitude threshold varies from 60 feet on ground to 180 feet at 27,000 feet. You get the altitude mismatch. To correct a mismatch, you should try to determine which side was correct by comparing against the standby instruments, then switch input source on the ESID panel for both PFDs. For example, with this altitude mismatch, switch input to Air Data Unit 2. Touch the EFIS ADC source selector. On both PFDs, the mismatch annunciation disappears, but you get the yellow ADC2 flag to remind you that both sides are using the same input source. Switching ADC input should also correct an IAS mismatch. In this example, both sides have been switched to Air Data Unit 1. For roll and pitch mismatches, you should switch attitude and heading input. Touch the ESID EFIS attitude and heading selector. The mismatch is removed, and both sides are fed only from AHARS 1. Notice the attitude flag. Switching attitude and heading inputs also fixes heading mismatches. Notice the heading flag. Apart from FMA and mismatch messages, there are some white and yellow flags that you should be aware of. When data is unavailable or invalid, it is replaced by white dashes. TCAS fail indicates that you will not see any TCAS Fly 2 bands on the IDSI. You will also see TCAS standby. The aligning message flashes, then goes steady on both PFDs during AHARS alignment. Normally executed automatically after the PFD's power-on self-test, AHARS alignment can also be performed in straight and level flight by pressing the Align switch light on an AHARS control panel. Aligning should take about 60 seconds on ground and about 90 seconds in flight. Also associated with AHARS, the DG flag indicates that the directional gyro mode has been selected with the DG button. Finally, red failure flags. The solution is to select the appropriate input source from one side according to checklist. For example, with this altitude failure, touch the ESID ADC source selector to move it to 2. The altitude indicator is restored. Notice the flag indicating that both PFDs are receiving the same input from ADC2.